everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today. This is Yanling Tan from OVHcloud Asia Pacific. I'm running the OVHcloud Startup Program by supporting the ecosystem and the startup community in this region, including Australia, where I'm based, Southeast Asia, and the rest of the countries in the Asia Pacific. OVHcloud Startup Program has supported more than 2,000 innovative businesses worldwide since we launched the program. We provide startups with reliable and affordable infrastructure needed to start and scale. With the program, startups at all stages get access to resources like co-marketing opportunities for branding exposure, technical support, and cloud infrastructure credit for up to $100,000, depending the maturity of your startups. In 2021, we launched the Let's Help Startup series in Asia Pacific. The idea is to provide a platform for startups scale up to learn and share from our guest speakers, depending the subjects and topics that we are chosen. That's very related to startup business. And today, I'm very thrilled to have Puay Lim Yeo, the Commercial Director of Glints, joining me. Puay Lim has years of experience in growing startup business from pre-Series A to Series D. What a remarkable achievement, Puay Lim. Hi, Puay Lim. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I would like to pass the floor to you to give an introduction to our audience and share with them who are you and what you're doing.
Thanks a lot, Yanling. Good morning, and good morning to all of you in the audience, wherever you might be situated today. Maybe it's morning time, maybe it's afternoon, but hello to you anyways. So yeah, thanks very much for that very complimentary introduction by Yanling. So my name is Puay Lim. I'm Commercial Director at Glints. I'm based in Singapore, calling into this webinar from Singapore today. Very quick introduction to myself. So I've had a career that stems across public service, management consulting, but my startup journey began around 10 years ago. I was in a pre-Series A insurtech startup that was looking at providing low-cost life and health insurance to the underserved in developing economies. It was a company called Bima. I spent about 9 years in that organization, looking after their South Asia and Southeast Asia business, all the way till the company matured to Series D. Earlier this year, in January, I joined Glints as Commercial Director, overseeing commercial strategy and operations. If you allow me to indulge in a 30-second introduction as to who Glints is, I'm just going to show my screen.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, 1 second. Here we go, yeah. So Glints is Southeast Asia's largest talent platform. It's a HR tech that we're running. So we provide recruitment and staffing solutions to employers, but more importantly, we also serve particularly young professionals on the talent side across Southeast Asia markets of Singapore, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Taiwan. And we connect those talents to the jobs from the employers. We also connect those talents to education and upskilling opportunities, as well as content and community related to their career development. Today, we are working with many clients, largely startups in the ecosystem in the region. And these include the big names like Grab, Ninja Van, ByteDance, TikTok, and so on and so forth, but as well as earlier stage or smaller startups like Vouch or Viagu or HydroX that's based out of markets, particularly like Singapore or Hong Kong. Today, our investors, and we are a Series C backed HR tech, include Monks Hill Ventures, Fresco Capital, Wavemaker, 500 HRNet, and most recently also Perso, which is the second largest HR company in Japan. I'm going to pause here for a second. And that's pretty much me and Glints in a nutshell, Yanling.
All right, thank you, Puay Lim, for the introductions. Yeah, amazing, and I'm happy to work with Glints moving forward to actually help startups and young professionals in the startup space as well. Yeah, which so you've been Glints have been working with a lot of you name quite a few very quite well-known startups or tech companies that in the space, and also help millions of young professionals looking and finding their dream careers. So but then in this, since last year and pandemic happened and all, what the changes that you see in the talent market compared to the pre-pandemic period, I would say.
Yeah, great question to kick us off, Yanni. I mean, obviously the pandemic is topical, it's top of mind for everyone, and I think more recently as the second wave with the Delta variant, a new variant sweeping across, especially APAC economies, it's more pertinent than ever. I mean, Glints ourselves, we are in two markets which are particularly affected. So Indonesia, I think the case numbers have been very concerning the last 2 weeks, and also Vietnam. I think the case numbers have hit a peak that was not even seen last year when the first wave of COVID was upon us. Where talent is concerned, I think it's actually had a bit of a uneven impact across the industry. So obviously, I think there are industry verticals, travel and hospitality, for instance, which have been very negatively affected. But at the same time, what we also have seen is that there are verticals like e-commerce or logistics, which actually have been positively affected. I think for the reasons that I don't need to state. So in those industries which have actually seen an increase in business, we've actually seen a corresponding increase in hiring activity. And as a talent business, Glints, obviously we've repositioned ourselves to also be adequately equipped and positioned to address the needs of the growing businesses in spite of the pandemic. I think the other macro trend that's probably worth mentioning is the embrace or the adoption of remote working as more of a norm. I think prior to the pandemic, people saw remote working as kind of this thing that some jobs or some industries maybe potentially are more easily adapted to. I think the pandemic has forced many industries, many businesses to, or maybe even all businesses or all industries to look at remote working as a very viable way of actually continuing business as usual. And again, not to overstate it, I wouldn't say that, I know the phrase new norm or new normal has been thrown around by the media quite a lot. I think what we see in our business is that I think there is a broader acceptance of remote working as a viable alternative to working from the office. And there is a broader acceptance of that into roles that maybe previously would not have been conceived or perceived as being suitable for remote working. But at the same time, there also is a realization that some roles, particularly roles that maybe require more creative or spontaneous interactions, or there are certain scenarios where maybe a very young or nascent companies, so in this case, startups, which are still trying to build culture and build a sense of company identity, for which remote working poses challenges, not insurmountable challenges, but challenges that do need to be recognized. So that's another thing that's probably worth mentioning in the context of the backdrop of the pandemic.
Yeah, that's so true. The trend that before that, working from home and all, it kind of a bit luxurious or kind of perks that some organization will offer to the employees. But with the pandemic hit, then most of us actually have to move to remote and seldom have chance to have in-person interactions with your colleagues, even with your customers, and also remote working become a new norm. Yeah, that's right. That's the new terminology that we use these days. But then as a startup and all, don't have much experience, especially early stage startup, not the established, but early stage startup, they don't have much experience in even running their own business, but moreover to actually managing the team remotely could be a quite challenging approach that they have to take as a founders of the company. Yeah, what would be the advice that what are the things that the startup founders should equip themselves in managing the team, whether in the office or remotely? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot for asking that question. I mean, I would say it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. I'll talk about how to deal with the challenges first, and then I'll talk about opportunities. I think where the challenges are concerned, uh, I mentioned already, I think it's about culture building, it's about integration with the team, it's about also managing for productivity, and managing for effective performance, right, across the team. I think for early stage startups, I think one thing that's very important is, first of all, you need to get your rituals right? So we've seen this now in several of our clients. We see this also with ourselves. I mean, we're not early stage anymore, but we also continue to hire quite a bit remotely, as Glints, as a Series C startup. But what's very important is that you got to have the routines or the rituals set up, right? So if you are running a team of engineers, for example, you got to be strict and enforce the idea of your daily stand-ups, what time those rituals begin. Everyone has to show up. It doesn't matter where you are, what time zones you're in. You got to show up. You have to commit everyone to that. That's important, not just because it's an exchange of information. It really is an interaction and touch point for the team. Then I would say beyond that, you really have to be mindful and thoughtful about team building and culture building activities, because in this pandemic, we don't have the luxury of bringing everyone into an offsite. We don't have luxury of bringing everyone in the same room, especially if you have a team that's scattered, not just across different locations, but let's say across different national boundaries. So we have clients. So Ninja Van is a client of ours, and one thing they do is they've actually designed lots of games, right? Games that can be played across the team in different remote locations, and they play these games on a regular basis, whether at their company all hands every week or some other regular forum. They play these games not because it's just fun. They play these games because it's important to foster that sense of belonging and community and company identity, even across the remote lines. Then I would say, still on productivity, the last point here that I say is important is that I think it's always useful also for even early stage startups, even if you may not have your own HR function or your own HR team set up, but to set out some ground rules or guidelines for what constitutes work and what constitutes work and where you draw the lines or the divides between work and home or work and personal life. And I think that's important because, again, in a remote context, what everybody have started to pick up is, mental health and it becomes something that's actually much more, people are a lot more mindful about issues like that, right? And that's coming out of a situation where working from home starts to blur the boundaries between work and personal life. And I think even in an early stage startup where you do need everyone pretty much hands on deck and everything, you do want to draw the lines a bit, because I think in the pre-pandemic world, we have the luxury of code switching. When we go to work, we put on a shirt and we jump in our daily commute and we go to the office. But when you switch to a fully remote setup, those boundaries, those natural boundaries that guide our behaviors get erased, right? And I think it is contingent on us as employers or as founders to basically set some guidelines and rules, because that's also important for sustainability in a continued remote working setup as the pandemic drags on. Now, I said that there's challenges, but it's also opportunities. So where opportunities are concerned, I think what the embrace or the adoption of remote working as more of a norm has given businesses, especially startups, is the option now to tap into talent pools which are no longer bound by geographic parameters, right? So you're no longer confined. If you're sitting in Singapore, as I am today, you're no longer confined definitively by having to hire within Singapore. Today, more so than previously, you're probably more open and ready to look at hiring transnationally, right? So we have many clients that Glints serves today, and Glints helps today, where Singapore-based startups, Singapore-based businesses actually look to hire remote talent from Indonesia or from Vietnam or from any one of the neighboring countries in Southeast Asia. And that has some very obvious advantages. One is you tap into a wider talent pool. Two is you actually are able to circumvent what is emerging as some very significant talent supply demand gaps in especially advanced or developed capital cities like Singapore. And you're able to now actually circumvent that, tap into a regional talent pool where you can rebalance that supply demand economics, right? And what this actually translates into, in very, very material terms, is cost effectiveness, which is very important for startups which are capital constrained or basically trying to stretch the dollar, especially at early stages. It really lends you cost effectiveness in being able to tap into high quality talent pools, even if you are situated in Singapore or Hong Kong or another advanced or high cost capital city.
Okay, I can't agree more that there's a lot of advantages, opportunities that because of the pandemic, the remote working, hiring that you can actually tap along. Yeah, and also the diversified cultural background that you can actually learn from each other as well to bring in your talents. But the thing is, how as a startup to attract this talent to work for a startup? You know that startup usually smaller team. It's not easy to actually competing with others like larger company with well brand, a lot of perks, benefits, or even a lot of resources that they could offer compared to startups that they put maybe lack of this particular areas. How to attract the talent to join startup? It could be because startup employee or candidates will have that not willing to join because of the instability that they will be worried. Is it a long term security in terms of job? Yeah, what would you think?
Thanks a lot for asking that question, Yanling. I think hiring a startup team, especially your core team of and as a startup, people is fundamental. It's the number one thing that you have to do, and it's the first thing that you have to do, and it's also the most important thing that you have to do at an early stage, and you have to try to get it as right as possible. At Glints, my co-founder CEO often says people decisions are the most important and are some of the best decisions he's taken, but also some of the worst that he's taken. And I couldn't agree more. I think especially for early stage startups, and I've been part of 2 startups now in my career. I would say at the early stages, you simply can't take it for granted, right? Because as you said, the challenges are formidable. You're an unknown brand, and you have to convince people to join you. And you probably are capital constrained, so you are also not able to compete dollar-wise on compensation, apples to apples against a large corporate or mature enterprise compensation. And stability and certainty is something that you are pretty much short on because you're a startup, right? And you're operating, and then if you overlay on top of this, you're operating in Asia, where I think traditional mindsets around what constitutes a successful career are still, to an extent, grounded in ideas of becoming a professional in let's say the legal service, in becoming a lawyer or becoming a doctor or becoming a banker. on accountant and so on and so forth. So there is that degree of also risk aversion that does exist. So how do you overcome and surmount all these things, right, as an early stage founder? I think what I can share is that I think as startups, as startup founders or early team members of startups, one thing we really have to be prepared for is when it comes to hiring, you have to put it up there on your priority list, and you have to be prepared to invest quite a lot of your time and effort, personal time and effort into it, especially at an early stage when your team is not that big and there's just a handful of you. I would say easily you could be looking at spending up to 50% of your time just trying to put your team together, and it's worthwhile investment of that time. So that's the first thing that I would say. Then the second thing I would say is that I think how do you then deploy that time, right? Because second thing I would say is that I think it's important to try um, to sell your story. I think storytelling is very important for startup founders to attract talent to your teams. And what storytelling? Storytelling is you do need to be able to articulate and communicate the vision of what is it that you're trying to build, right? And that conversation is best had in person, but today in the pandemic world, even if you can't do it in person, it's still best done on a one-to-one basis again with prospective candidates. And it's a worthwhile investment of a founder's time or of a senior member's time to do that if you're trying to attract talent on board. I myself, I mentioned at my start, at my introduction, that I joined Glints 6 months ago. I was in a very, very long interview process with Glints before I decided to join, but I would not have been willing to join Glints until I've had a chance to spend substantial time with the co-founder CEO over coffee, over lunch, to basically really hear what he has in mind as to what he's trying to achieve with Glints. That was an important interaction for me. And I think it is an important interaction for all prospective candidates who are looking to join a startup. They do need to have access to the founders, and if not the founders, very senior members of the team who can articulate and sell the story, sell the vision. So that's the second thing I would say is very important. The third thing I would say that founders should look to do is you should look to hire for fit and for potential. So when you're building an early stage startup team, what you want is because you're going to be constrained to compete for the most experience or the most specialized skills or talents that you might want in your team.
Yeah.
What you can do is you can look for potential. You hire for fit and potential. So hiring for potential means that you look for talents who are maybe still at the earliest stage of their careers, who may not bring with them all the necessary proven track record or skills and experience that you're looking for, but demonstrate either in the course of their career or in the course of the interviews the potential to grow and develop into those exact skills that you're looking for. And that's a good way to bring someone on to be part of the journey with you. Right, so that's one thing, hiring for potential. But hiring for fit is equally, if not more important. So hiring for fit, what do I mean by that? So even at an early stage, startup founders need to have a very good understanding as to what's the culture and values that they want to promote and they want to build. What is the type of company that they're trying to build? And hiring then should be then very much pointed towards looking for like-minded and culture values fit with that culture values vision that you have for your startup. And that culture values fit, that mindset fit, is potentially most important or more important than anything else at an early stage. Because it is that mindset fit that's going to get most early stage startup teams through the most difficult moments in a startup's journey. So hiring for potential, hiring for fit, as opposed to hiring for experience or track record is something that I would also advocate. And then the last thing that I would say or maybe the second to last. Okay, the second to last thing I would say is that when it comes to compensation, I think early stage founders have something in the toolkit that mature organizations do not have. And that's the opportunity to make an equity or stock option offer. And we cannot underestimate this, right? People join startups because they want to be part of the growth journey. And the best way to align their interests is to include equity or stock options as part of the compensation. Now, we could probably go into a whole topic around compensation, but that's probably merits another 1 or 2 hours in itself. But in order to be competitive or to be attractive to the target talents that you're trying to bring on, do not shy away from being able to offer equity or stock options. It's a very powerful tool. And then the last thing I would say is don't be afraid to ask for help, right? So the most conventional sources of help for startup founders would of course be your investors, accelerators, others in the startup ecosystem. It's a community, right? Other founders that you might interact with, people you might share a co-working space with. Ask for help because people will help you if you're situated in the right ecosystem. And those referrals, those recommendations, those introductions that you get to talents often produces your best candidates as opposed to an open search on a job listing site, for instance. Asking for help, and this is where I'm happy to say this is how Glints is positioned. I think Glints is kind of a unique, because we are a startup ourselves, so we know how difficult it is. So we have also positioned ourselves to particularly serve startups. 90% of our clients today are startups, right? Glints is able to do this because today our HR tech platform actually gives us an efficiency that allows us to then reduce our fees, reduce our margins, reduce our charges, such that we are actually able to provide our service to startups at fees which are quite a bit lower than what you would typically experience in the traditional recruitment space. And that's actually quite compelling, I think, to startups, because startups typically don't think about using headhunters or recruiters to help them scale their team. But Glints, I think our model actually allows us to create that viability for that option because we have been able to use technology-enabled efficiencies to undercut or to disrupt the traditional recruiter model. And that's how we have also grown our business, by serving a lot of startups and helping them to scale up their teams. So Glints is also an opportunity for help, but don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, that's so true. Don't underestimate the ecosystem help and also support that can actually give to startups. Yeah, like what we've been working with the enabler and also people like Glints and other enabler in the communities to help startup bring connect all the dots and bring the talents together, and even like you say that tell the stories about the startups that not different, right? Pitching to the investor, to convince people how the potential and what the potential that you can bring to the disruptive market and what kind of problem that you're trying to solve. The value and cultural fit is really important because as a professionals, a lot of especially young professional, they would like to be in the environment, in the workspace that they can actually thrive and grow together with the company. And yeah, so that's what they are actually value most. And getting the right team is so crucial. Like you say that getting the right fit of people, right potential people is so important, especially for early stage startup, that to build up the team for the long term. Without that, it's really hard for the business to actually continue and sustain. Like what's the analysis that I've been looking at is like why startup fails. One of the reasons is didn't get the right team. That's actually consists more than 20% of the reasons why startup fails. I'm not talking about meeting the market needs and cash flow issues, running out of cash, or poor management on pricing, costing, then the right fit and right team is the most important. And all the factors that I mentioned just now is all related to people. It's all related to the team that you work together and help you to actually bring the products or services to the markets as well. That's the most important areas. But screening and acquire the talents, like you said, is important to use the right tools, use the right ecosystem to help you to actually able to acquire the talent that you are looking for, especially for startup. And of course, no different for other businesses as well. Yeah, but what kind of strategy that you were actually things that, because nowadays a lot you use the technology, you use even looking into the social media to recruit. Do you think that's a trend now, and also is a good strategy for a startup to actually look for the talent?
I think your question is what channels are most effective, right? Or what ways do you use to look for talent? I mentioned referrals just now. Okay, so maybe to add some nuance to my answer. I think you got to look at your needs evolution, right? At the very beginning, if you're just trying to assemble very core team members, and these are going to be probably the skeleton or the backbone of your startup for years to come. These are going to be senior guys in your team. For those kind of roles, right? Senior core members, you probably want, I think referrals are still probably one of the most effective methods, right? And looking within the ecosystem, doing personal outreach, I think that's still probably one of the most key methods to source for who would constitute the core. Ecosystem partners like accelerators can help, plugging into the community can help, but that personal outreach or the personal touch is quite important. I don't think you're going to find your founding CTO by listing on a job site, for example.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that you should come to Glints to look for a founding CTO. We wouldn't be able to help you with that, right? So you really need to find people that you connect with at a very personal level. I think that's very important. And I think for those kind of roles, that's probably where your best bet's going to be, right? Community, referrals, personal networks, right? Outreach. As your startups starts to get a little bit bigger, you will start to realize that you need to also staff up on the next layer, right? Of people to form your working teams, right? So these would be your mid-senior roles, your next 5 to 10 hires, for example, right? To enable the team to produce more, to be more productive, and to work more quickly and work with more output. And those roles, again, can be slightly specialized because you start to look at maybe getting a team of engineers in place. Right? You start to maybe look at maybe having your product team starting to take a little bit more shape, right? And then you probably also need to have some business development or sales capability starting to form up. When you start to have that layer of roles starting to appear in your stage of development, that's when I think you can start to look a little bit externally, right? So Glints, for example, we would come in, we would be able to help you with any number of those roles, whether that's engineering, product, or business development, sales, marketing. We're pretty good at finding not people with 10 or 20 years experience, but people with maybe, let's say, 2 to 3 years up to maybe 5 to 7 years experience, because that's where I think you can really find that potential talent who are coming in at probably a budget that's more suitable for a stage of startup at that level, but also people who is probably where you're going to find the most alignment where fit is concerned, who's willing to come with you for that growth journey. For those kind of roles, engineering, product, and business development, sales, marketing, it's also where you might want to start to explore. You mentioned social media. I mean, social media for me is it's where you can post a job ad, but what's also important is where you invest a little bit of time into doing some degree of employer branding, right? Social media is a cheap way to do employer branding. You're not going to be able to invest in sponsorships or showing up at huge events or putting advertisements or whatever it is in traditional media channels. But if you go into social media and you start some activities like a blog, or you start a regular Instagram or Facebook feed, depending on where your audiences might be, it is actually a low cost but important effort to get some employer branding done, because that's important in also helping you to bolster your chances of landing candidates when you go external for this layer: engineering, product, business development, sales, marketing, and you start to go external with recruiter help, like from Glints, or you start to go to the job boards to try and get some positions filled. I would say that until this point, you probably will not be equipped to be doing any of this stuff internally, because your team effort will still be very much everyone's doing everything at this moment. I would say the next stage, once you get into that next 5 to 10 people have been hired, is probably when you would start to want to think about bringing in, for example, an HR resource or talent acquisition resource in your team to help you with these activities. So when your startup's about, maybe you're starting to be at around that 10 to 15 stage, you probably want to start thinking about, okay, look, am I poised for my next ramp up, which is probably going to take me to around 25 to 30 persons at least, right? If you're ready for that next stage, then you probably want to start to look at building internal capabilities with talent acquisition to do that. Not too much, because that's going to be overheads, but you probably want to have at least one person, right, coming into the team to not work completely as a one person or show, but to be able to be your coordinator or your interface for deploying external channels and coordinating the effort so that you are able to actually run that recruitment activity at that scale.
Great, great. Yeah, in fact, you actually mentioned something that I wanted to ask. I plan to ask about that, what to do with, because startup founders have so many things to juggle around. Then they have to look at the business, they have to do the product and services, at the same time look at the human resources piece. And I was thinking that, okay, how the startup actually could do this all by themselves, or should they outsource, or should they have someone, HR manager, someone to actually taking care of the recruitment and also managing the team itself. Yeah, okay, so that's a really, really tricky for the startups, and to actually come in the right time to build the right team as well. It is so hard for them. And thanks for sharing the insights based on your experience. It's really valuable for our audience, I'm sure. Yeah. Next, probably I would like to maybe I think our startup founders, and also even the candidates, potential candidates on the sessions, would like to know that what what are the advice that you will give to someone who looking to work in startups? What should they actually prepare themselves to be in the startup organization?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a good question. Now we pointed at at candidates or talents who are maybe thinking about joining a startup. I think for anybody thinking about joining a startup, you do need to come into this with your eyes wide open. I think if you just read what's on media and everything, sometimes it can sound like it's exciting and it's glamorous, especially I think the last 8 to 10 years, where I think startups have really been hyped up, and you see the hyper growth of some really, really big names within this region. Of course, many, many success stories today. But I think anyone thinking about joining a startup needs to understand that there's also lots of things which are maybe not as rosy or not as shiny as what the stories seem to say, right? So what are some of these things? I think one is you have to be prepared that for a very, very high degree of ambiguity or uncertainty. And I'm not just talking about the stability of the job. I'm actually talking about just you do have to be able to deal with problems that don't clearly present themselves, job scopes that can creep all the time, or organizations, businesses that will come across as unstructured, messy, yeah, and confusing, right? So that's one thing. You have to be able to you must be ready to embrace ambiguity or uncertainty. That's one. Two is I think you need to come into this with like a growth mindset. I think the biggest thing that a startup can give anyone in their professional development is the learning and growth journey. I think it's probably not too audacious of a claim to say that you can probably learn at a startup in 1 year what you might otherwise have taken maybe 3, 4, 5 years in a much more structured and stable organization. And why is that the case is because a startup faces a lot of issues and will need, I mean, it's always all hands on deck, right? So the exposure that you get, whether it's client facing or that's internal or that's with investors, fundraising or whatever it might be, you're basically tossed into the washing machine and it's sink or swim, right? You have to figure it out. And if you figure it out, it adds to that's what you clock, right? It's your experience. You level up in that way. But you have to come in with the appetite to want to learn and want to grow. And if you do, I think it can be extremely rewarding. But if you come in thinking that, okay, I just want to do more of the same and have predictability, then that's going to come as a bit of a shock. So I think having a growth mindset is very important. And then I would say the third thing is I think you got to know earlier on I talked about how it's important for founders and startup early team members to sell the story and sell the vision. That's them selling their why, And I also said like the advice to founders is to look for fit culture values. So from a candidate's perspective, you need to be very self-aware also for your own purpose or your own why, and also your own culture values. Because when you come in, I think you also need to be cognizant that you're joining because you buy into that purpose, that vision, that why, and you also want to be cognizant that you're joining a team that you feel our culture values fit with. If you're not self-aware about that, I don't think you would last actually. I think you would find it difficult to stay motivated or to stay driven, and you'll find it difficult to gel and bond with the team. In in order to sustain a longer term career in the startup world. So maybe those three things I would say. Yeah.
Thank you for the points that you share. Yeah, that's true. It's come from both party as an employer and also employees that they have to both have a clear, open mindset and to embrace the change, uncertainty, but at the same time work together to drive to the growth of the business as well. So the vision and the cultural value fit is still the fundamental of both parties. Yeah, in order to be success, whether from a career perspective or the founder business perspective. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing with us this. I think that's about it from myself. I'm not sure whether is there any questions from the audience. Let me have a look. Yeah. Okay, we don't have, but I do have someone send me email for questions that you mentioned. Someone asking about the trade-off between salary and equity that startup can offer to the employee, and how to actually balance it between the two as the startup founders. Yeah. What your take about it?
I would say that it's not unusual for executives or professionals, especially young ones, to take anywhere between, I would say, 20-30% or even up to maybe a 50% pay cut to join a startup, right? So that's in cash terms. My advice would be that, if you are actually trying to bring someone in at, sorry, actually maybe let me take one step back, right? It depends on how early you are. If you are just literally founding the company, so you're at founder stage, then I think you can make a much more aggressive trade-off, because founders need to be much more hungry and prepared to take equity instead of cash, right? And I mean, founders basically can be on basically 100% equity, if you can afford it, to have no cash component. So that's quite a different conversation. But if the question is about, like, you're hiring your employee number 5 to employee number 10, and you're trying to bring them in, I think it's not unusual that it can be up to a 50% pay cut they are asking people to take to come and join you. But correspondingly, then I think you might want to be able to offer to make up on that 20, 30 to 50% with equity. Now, that's a bit tricky, because then how do you value equity, right? This is why I said it's actually a whole topic on its own. Because at the startups, at the very, very early stage, your value is what you say it is, right? So it's actually anyone's guess what your valuation at that point is. But that's actually less important. I think what's important is to be able. That's why I think selling the case is important. Selling the vision is important. If you're able to convince an early stage employee that you've got the potential and the vision to take this company to an end stage where you could be valued a lot more, then that 20, 30 to 50% trade-off on cash terms against equity, right, will be very compelling, right, to the candidate that you're trying to attract, right? And that's up to you as to how much you are prepared or willing to carve out. But my advice is, of course, be aggressive, right? Be prepared to do it to early stage guys, because early stage guys will join you. They take on enormous amounts of risk to come and join you. And the only way you are ever going to make it worth the while beyond the growth and learning journey, compensation wise, is through equity. So if you can carve it out for them. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I'm sure the person who actually asked this question learn and get some insights from you. Thank you so much. All right, I think that's about it for today's sessions. I hope we covered most of the topics that we'd like to discuss. What other last advice that you have, Puay Lim, to our audience?
Maybe not advice per se, but I would say that in Glints, we have actually quite a few resources which are quite useful for startup founders looking to set up remote teams in Asia. We have a compensation report for talents in Southeast Asia. You can find this on our website at glints.com. Click through to ebooks and you will find that. We also run frequent events like this one with specific topics around how we overcome recruitment or onboarding or culture building under a series that we call Future of Hiring. Next one is up on 13th of August. So, if there's interest, I encourage startup founders to join this. I think it's very, very useful to learn from not just Glints, but the guest speakers that we also bring on board. And then finally, I would say that for those of you who are joining us today, I think I mentioned earlier that the pandemic has also opened up opportunities for startup founders to do remote hiring, and Glints, plays a very big role in enabling that, especially into Southeast Asia talent markets. And for attendees of today, I think we are prepared to give you a very attractive activation offer where we're waiving 100% of our recruitment fees for the first 2 remote or offshore hires that you would make with Glints. That's worth around 14,000 US dollars in value. So if you're interested in this, come and visit us at glints.com or global.glints.com. And yeah, drop us a request for a consultation, and our guys will get in touch.
Thank you for sharing this, Puay Lim.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Next, I would like to. We also the next Let's Help Startup series will be on the 12th of August as well, which is the design thinking to kickstart your innovation idea. All right. Let me just quickly share the screen. Okay. Sorry. Can you see my screen now? So the event is actually on the 12th of August at 11:30 Australia Eastern Standard Time or 9:30 Singapore time. So guest speaker is David Hauser from Silicon Beach, Australia. Feel free to reach out to us through our social channels as well as our websites for details. So do stay connected on our events. I realized that you would not be able to see that. So this is the event, and do stay connected and reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm going to drop my email on the chat box or the question box, and reach out to me for more details, or you'd like to know more about Glints, feel free to contact us directly. Thank you so much, Puay Lim, for joining us today. I'm sure our audience have learned a lot from today's sessions. We'll keep in touch and stay safe.
Thanks a lot, Yanning. Thanks for having me. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.